Now it looks like Vegapunk's message has come to an end after 14 chapters, and I don't know if this is just me, but the way the message ended, or seemingly ended, is very much like Oda himself telling us that there is so much more to come and that we haven't seen anything yet. So pair that with the final double page spread, which is insane, just seeing that collection of characters on one page who look to be the ones who will play the biggest roles moving forward in the story, in the final war, and maybe even in the claiming of the One Piece. I have a previous video which focuses on the four of Emu, Blackbeard, Shanks and Luffy, and with this latest chapter it only seems fitting to do the same thing with the rest of the characters in that spread. Doing my best to make sure it all fits with what I've already said in my previous video. Although I'm not a master storyteller like Oda, but I will try my best. I also recommend watching that first video first, since I will be referencing it in this one. So this is the continuation of my roadmap to and of the final war, that in this hypothetical timeline will take place after the One Piece is found and after Luffy has become king of the pirates. And what I want to start with is the character or characters we know the least about, which are Saint Figurland Garling and the mysterious silhouette underneath Dragon. As for the silhouette, can't really speculate on what their role is going to be, since we don't even know who they are, with people's best guess being Shanks' brother or relative, and then with Garling he's most likely Shanks' father or uncle. And I do have a place for him in the final war, which I will get to later. The reason I'm saying this small piece here first is because if they really are Shanks' real family, then they will need to interact at least once with each other. But if you have seen the first part of this roadmap, you'll know that Shanks sadly will not make it to the final war, so any interactions there will be impossible. Meaning that the only available time for this to occur will be before the final war and before everything I'm going to talk about in this video. And my thinking is that Shanks has already met them and spoke to both of them. This would have happened when Shanks visited Marijua to talk to the elders, so he would have had a run-in with his family, maybe somewhere in the Holy Land. Although having only one interaction seems too little, since this is Shanks' family we are talking about, but it could be okay like this, since I'm expecting the conversation to go as follows. Garling and Mr. Silhouette Person will be belittling Shanks and his life in the world below, only for Shanks to laugh it off and walk away, maybe saying something like life as a pirate isn't so bad. And that's it. That's all we get between Shanks and his family, because the core message there will be one that's been present throughout the entire story, which is the fact that you are not bound by blood. The only reason we got other members of Shanks' family is to show that even someone of such power and stature as Shanks, with as crazy a family lineage as his, is no exception to that. Your blood does not define who you are. And moving on to the actual topic, there is no better character to start with than the last remaining emperor that I haven't talked about yet, and that's none other than the liberator of Impel Down, former crewmate of fellow Emperor Red-Haired Shanks, and member of the crew of the King of the Pirates Gold D. Roger, the genius jester Buggy the Clown. He was mentioned very briefly in the last video, so let's expand on that. His current location is his base of operations, or the Cross Guild's base of operations, Empty Bluffs Island, where he recently made his declaration clear about going after the One Piece, and I see no detours on his path to Laugh Tale, except for the fact that he has no road poneglyphs, and I see no reasonable way in which he does get them to get to Laugh Tale on his own. So I'm thinking he will tail someone else like the Straw Hats to get there. So let's go with that, although I already have Blackbeard tailing them up to Roadstar Island, where all of the stuff with Shanks happens. So pretty much we have a conga line of pirate ships, the Straw Hats up front, Cross Guild tailing them, and at the back the Blackbeard pirates following the both of them. Meanwhile, Shanks waits on Roadstar. Luffy gets to Roadstar first, proves himself to Shanks, gives back the Straw Hat, and go to Laugh Tale. Buggy reaches Roadstar. Shanks will then give him his road poneglyph rubbings that he stole from Kid, since they are friends and he knows Buggy will not be an issue for Luffy and the Straw Hats. And then Buggy makes his way to Laugh Tale, and the rest proceeds as stated in the last video. Blackbeard arrives on Roadstar last and beats Shanks within an inch of his life. Meanwhile on Laugh Tale, it's the Straw Hats versus Cross Guild, where really Mihawk is the only challenger and Zoro will beat him to become the world's strongest swordsman. And in the name of Buggy falling upwards, he will also be beaten down, but will regain his consciousness for when the Straw Hats find the One Piece and reveal the true history. So Buggy's gag will continue, but in such a way that it definitely does not overshadow the Straw Hats and Luffy. And out of everyone on that double page spread in the latest chapter, he is the only one whose role will be more or less complete before the final war. Whereas for everyone else, I'm more concerned about what they will do during the final war. Because for these guys, it's honestly just a matter of them showing up to the battlefield. The last thing for Buggy to do now is to sit on the empty throne, which he will do by stowing away on the Thousand Sunny when they leave for Marijua. And after he does sit on it, Buggy can do whatever the heck he wants for all I care. His role in the story of meaning will end with him sitting at the pinnacle of the world. Next is Dragon and Sabo, the revolutionary army, as well as Akainu. Again, just like Buggy, I mentioned them in passing, specifically how the PR of both Dragon and Akainu is in the dumps right now, and that the two of them need to do something for people to get behind them again as a credible force. So the first train of thought is where Dragon and Akainu will be each other's final matchup in the final war, since we know Dragon was a member of the Navy and Akainu seems to have some kind of grudge against him since he didn't refer to Luffy as Straw Hat or anything, but rather as Dragon's son continuously. So there's definitely some animosity there, but I think that the bad blood between them is purely one-sided. Dragon doesn't have anything against Akainu, but Akainu hates him for leaving the Navy. Similarly to how Buggy felt betrayed by Shanks not going after the One Piece, maybe Akainu and Dragon were friends, and also knowing Akainu's mentality, his feelings over Dragon leaving the Marines were amplified due to his viewpoint of absolute justice, where the Marines are absolute, so leaving them is practically a sin in his eyes. So Akainu has all this hatred for Dragon, but on the other side, Dragon himself doesn't really care. So that's where Sabo comes in as the final fight for Sakazuki, since I also have something else planned for Dragon as well. But as for Sabo, there's surely no better adversary than the brother of the guy Sakazuki killed, who both bears his will and his devil fruit. It's like a fated rematch where Ace is there in spirit. And remember, the Revolutionary Army's main goal is bringing down the current establishment. So not only will Sabo be fighting for Ace, but he will also be fighting as the Chief of Staff of the Revolutionary Army. So while beating Akainu's ass, he will also be breaking his worldview, where the Navy isn't the organization Akainu built up in his mind, and he'll also see what's happening around him. What the likes of Kuzan and Kobe are doing, which I will get to later. After this fight, Akainu will be both physically and mentally destroyed. And back to Dragon, his matchup is going to be against Saint Figure Land Garling. There's the very basic reasoning, which is Dragon being the head of the Revolutionary Army and Garling being the head of the God's Knights. It's an obvious pairing, but just like I said in that previous video, this is One Piece where everything is connected on a much deeper level than just that. I have already speculated that Dragon had visited Marijua before, so maybe him and Garling have already been acquainted. The best I can come up with here is that Garling executed Luffy's mother. She was a celestial dragon who, after giving birth to Luffy, obviously publicly shamed the celestial dragons and their system and was put to death for it. The topic of Luffy's mother has taken a turn with the reveal of Toritoma, the previous empress of Amazon Lily, but nothing has been confirmed yet. So having Garling be the one to have done this, it would mean that while everything Dragon has done with the Revolutionary Army and such up to this point has been purely selfless, really, you know, not for personal gain, him fighting Garling would be completely him fighting for his own personal reasons. Although taking down Garling would also help with the Revolutionary Army's main goal in the long run as well. So of course Sabo and Dragon fighting would basically be the last part of the plan to bring down the world government by taking down the top dogs. You have Akainu and Garling respectively, with the toppest of dogs, Imu, obviously being dealt with by Luffy. Next is Kuzan, and I have two paths laid out for him. Even after everything he has done since leaving the Navy, including the fight with Garp and Hachinosu against Sword, there is still a chance that he is going to betray the Blackbeard pirates eventually. But I don't think it's a long con. Like, this isn't something that has been planned since the Akainu fight on Punk Hazard. He left for real because he genuinely felt that the Navy would go to waste under Akainu's leadership. As for joining Blackbeard, Kuzan definitely has a moral code and he knows 100% of the heinous things that the members of the crew have done. And when he joined them, he was most certainly at his lowest point. I think Kuzan has been planning something from the second Blackbeard invited him aboard. Because look at his words. Blackbeard says that we all profit from having our own agendas. You're free now, so what do you want to do? So since then, Kuzan has been using Blackbeard to get to a point where he can make his own move. So clarifying again, this isn't a move that the Navy is involved in. This is Kuzan making his own decisions, even if it meant having to impale his own teacher on an ice spike. His greater goal is more important, and think about Gob's mentality. An old soldier's life means nothing next to that of a young person's, and I'm sure Kuzan is acutely aware of Gob's way of thinking, being his former pupil, and if he cared enough about the world to challenge Akainu for the Fleet Admiral spot, then it seems plausible that he would still care now if he's given the chance to make a change, which Blackbeard unknowingly offered him. So the specifics of this betrayal, I don't know, but the possibility is there. Alternatively, the second path. What if Kuzan really devoted himself to being a member of the Blackbeard Pirates? Given what we've known about him, it seems odd since he has shown to care, but what if that care has just dissipated with time? Like seeing the destruction of Marineford, then losing his chance at making changes as Fleet Admiral. The idea of Akainu being top dog was actually bad enough for him to quit. And he strayed even further by joining Blackbeard, where by this point his idea of lazy justice had devolved into simply not caring anymore. What consequence is everyone else? There's crime and horror everywhere, so why not just look out for himself? And Gob did say it best, only weaklings lose their way, so what if Kuzan really did just lose his way? And we can bring in Kobe here, the final person on that double page spread. What if they face off in the final war, both as students of the greatest marine to ever live, the hero Gob, where Kuzan lost his way? Kobe has been able to stay on the right path, and it will be a battle of strength where, to put it one way, Kuzan's mental frailty of giving up and choosing something else will be against Kobe's stubbornness of seeing things through. I mean, he's been shouting about becoming an admiral as long as Luffy's been shouting about becoming the king of the pirates. And maybe the outcome of the fight will mirror the two of them as well, where Kuzan got beaten and couldn't become fleet admiral. Kobe will win, proving himself and maybe one day eventually becoming the fleet admiral himself. And this will lead back to Akainu, who obviously hates Kobe, and he will watch Kobe beat Kuzan while Sabo beats him, where the navy that he once knew is being replaced right in front of his eyes. And that is all of them, from Emu, Blackbeard, Shanks, Luffy, Buggy, Sabo, Dragon, Galling, Silhouette Man, Akainu, Kuzan and Kobe. I'm sure there are still others who will play a big role in this final war or final saga maybe, but by Oda's hands these are the ones with the biggest of those roles. And after all of this, I am incredibly confident in saying that none of this that I've said in these two videos combined will be at all correct, because that's just how One Piece is.